Building security immediately rushed over, aggressively dragging Amara Sullivan out of the grand lobby. No one realized that the woman humiliated that day was in fact the most powerful CEO in the tech industry. No one could have predicted that just a few hours later, the entire fate of Brightwell Enterprises would completely collapse. Today's story is not just about a silent act of retribution. It is a journey of powerful resurgence, turning pain into strength to transform an entire industry. A story of rising above justice and of unwavering belief that kindness and integrity will always triumph over injustice. If you believe in the power of compassion and the drive for change, make sure to share this video to spread the inspiration, and subscribe to our channel to join us on more meaningful and empowering journeys. Now let's embark on this emotional journey together. The day Ellington Industries collapsed began with a simple misunderstanding. Amara Sullivan, the powerful billionaire head of the tech giant Sullivan Innovations, quietly entered the main lobby of the Ellington building with an understated but refined demeanor. No fanfare, no entourage. At the reception desk, Rachel Porter took one glance at Amara's brown skin and her minimalist yet luxurious outfit and hastily concluded that she didn't belong there. "Deliveries go around the back," Rachel sneered, signaling for security to come and grab Amara's arm. Nearby, Gregory Adams, executive vice president, immediately recognized Amara, but deliberately remained silent, allowing the humiliation to unfold. As Amara was escorted out, her face remained emotionless. Yet in her mind, a sharp plan for retaliation was already taking form. By that afternoon, Ellington Industries' stock began to nosedive. By the end of the month, the company had officially vanished from the market. Morning sunlight filtered through the clear glass of the Ellington building, reflecting off the polished marble walls as a testament to the corporation's power and success. Across the street, Amara Sullivan, the powerful and enigmatic woman of color leading Sullivan Innovations, quietly observed. To her, no business strategy was more important than understanding how potential partners treated others when they didn't know they were being evaluated. Amara gently adjusted the sleeve of her charcoal cashmere sweater, a minimalist yet lavish design that clearly reflected her refined taste. She wore no flashy jewelry or ostentatious brand labels, but anyone observant enough could tell this was a wealthy, powerful, and confident woman. Blending into the bustling crowd, Amara stepped into Ellington's grand lobby. Instantly, she could feel the scrutinizing, judgmental stares directed her way. The disparity in treatment was glaring. A white man in an expensive suit had just walked in before Amara and was warmly greeted by the receptionist. Meanwhile, Amara, dressed just as elegantly, was met only with hesitant, skeptical glances. Steeling herself, Amara calmly made her way to the front desk. Behind the counter, Rachel Porter, the coal-blonde, blue-eyed receptionist, was too busy scrolling through her phone to notice the guests waiting. Amara patiently waited a few seconds before speaking with a soft yet commanding voice. "Good morning. I have an appointment with Mr. Benjamin Clark at 9 a.m. Could you please check for me?" Rachel slowly looked up, her eyes scanning Amara from head to toe, with barely concealed disdain. In front of her stood a woman of color in simple clothing, completely at odds with the image of a business partner she had envisioned. Rachel sighed and replied coldly, "Name Amara Sullivan." Amara answered calmly. Rachel immediately scoffed, muttering just loud enough for Amara to hear, "Deliveries go to the back entrance. Someone like you came in the wrong way." Amara froze at the blatant racism, though she had encountered similar situations before. The sting never fully dulled. Controlling her emotions, Amara insisted, "I'm not here for a delivery. I have a crucial meeting with Mr. Benjamin Clark regarding a partnership between Ellington and Sullivan." "Please check again," Rachel smirked, pretending to tap randomly on her keyboard, but not actually checking anything. She looked up and said mockingly, "There's no appointment under Amara Sullivan. Maybe you're confused, or just here to stir trouble." "You need to leave." Amara's brow furrowed slightly. Her gaze sharpened, though she maintained her poise. "You should double-check the schedule. This meeting is extremely important." Before Amara could finish, Rachel raised her hand and grabbed Amara's sleeve, roughly barking. "I already told you you don't have an appointment. Leave now or I'll call security." Amara looked down at the rough hand clutching her expensive cashmere, then slowly lifted her gaze to meet Rachel's icy stare. Her voice remained gentle, but carried an undeniable authority. "Take your hand off me!" Rachel hastily pulled her hand back, but immediately screamed, "Security! We have a troublemaker!" The lobby erupted into chaos. 2 large security guards rushed over and seized Amara without hesitation, pushing her toward the exit. Amara didn't resist. She stood tall, her proud, restrained gaze fixed straight ahead. From the executive elevator, Gregory Adams stepped out. Upon seeing Amara, he froze slightly, instantly recognizing the woman being treated like a criminal was Amara Sullivan, the very CEO. Ellington was desperately trying to court, yet instead of intervening, Gregory merely smirked coldly and folded his arms, watching the scene unfold. On the mezzanine level, Nina Brooks, one of the few managers of color at Ellington, gripped the railing, her face pale with anger. She recognized Amara instantly. Nina wanted to rush down and stop the injustice, but her legs were frozen. She knew all too well that speaking up would immediately end her career. All she could do was watch in silence, her heart heavy with guilt as Amara was shoved out the door. Outside, amid cold, disdainful stares, Amara Sullivan stopped on the sidewalk. Her sharp eyes swept up toward the towering Ellington Industries logo on the building. A cold smile briefly flickered across her lips. Amara pulled out her phone, pressed a speed dial button, and said in a calm but icy voice, "Initiate Plan B. Cancel all negotiations with Ellington immediately." Amara walked away slowly every step, a declaration of unwavering power and determination. Inside, Ellington Industries remained oblivious to the earthquake quietly starting beneath their feet. Back in the lobby, Rachel Porter returned to her seat, a smug smile spreading across her face. She casually stroked the expensive designer coat draped over her chair, sipped her hot latte, and whispered sarcastically to her colleague, "People like that always think they're important. It's funny how they don't know their place." The young coworker gave a small, awkward laugh, his eyes betraying a hint of unease. Rachel paid no attention. To her, power wasn't just held by the executives. Even a receptionist like her could decide who deserved to enter Ellington and who did not. Not far away, Gregory Adams still stood silently, his cold eyes fixed on the doors where Amara had been thrown out. In his mind, a secret plan was already taking shape. He knew very well that the woman they had just insulted was Amara Sullivan, the powerful billionaire. But instead of trying to salvage the situation, Gregory chose to remain silent, using this act of humiliation as a lever for his own ambitions. Inside Gregory Adams' mind, a cunning plan was quietly taking shape. Months ago, Gregory had already grown discontent with CEO Benjamin Clark's decision to partner with Sullivan Innovations. Being someone deeply rooted in traditional views, Gregory felt extremely uneasy about the idea of relying on a company led by a woman of color, something that directly threatened his fragile grip on power within Ellington Industries. And now, witnessing Amara Sullivan being misunderstood and humiliated before his eyes, Gregory realized this was the perfect opportunity to sabotage the deal without getting his hands dirty. Gregory slowly made his way toward the reception desk, his voice steady yet laced with cold calculation. "Rachel, what just happened here?" Rachel Porter jumped startled to find the executive vice president standing right beside her and quickly stood up. Her voice immediately softened. "Oh, it was just some woman pretending to have an appointment with Mr. Clark, Mr. Adams. Nothing serious. I handled it." Gregory raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Are you sure she wasn't an important guest?" Rachel let out a soft laugh, her eyes flashing with smugness. "Absolutely sure." Someone like that important. If she really was, she wouldn't be dressed so plainly. Gregory nodded in satisfaction, giving Rachel a light pat on the shoulder as encouragement, silently endorsing the arrogance and prejudice deeply ingrained in her good job. Rachel, stay vigilant. Like that Ellington needs people who know their place. Rachel smiled smugly at the compliment from her superior, completely unaware that she was merely a pawn in Gregory's silent game. Up on the mezzanine, Nina Brooks, the only woman of color in Ellington's middle management, stood frozen, her hand gripping the railing tightly. Rachel's vicious words echoed in Nina's mind, like sharp knives cutting deep into her pride. Nina knew that pain well. She had endured countless condescending looks and subtle racist remarks simply because of her skin color. To survive in this place, she had been forced to suppress her anger and swallow her pride. But today, watching Amara Sullivan, a woman she had quietly admired for her power and success, being treated just like herself, during all those years of silent suffering, Nina felt the hurt swell to an unbearable level. "Are you okay?" A gentle voice pulled Nina back to reality. It was Emily Carter, the new intern who had joined the company just a few months earlier. Nina forced a strained smile. "I'm fine," but deep down she knew she was far from fine. Outside, Amara Sullivan was already settled into the luxury car, waiting for her. Lena Howard, her trusted assistant, immediately opened the door and sat down across from her, her face tense. "We just got a call from Ellington," Lena reported quickly. "They want to confirm your appointment immediately." Amara looked out the window, her deep eyes betraying no emotion, then shook her head lightly. Her voice was calm but chilling. "It's too late, Lena. A company that allows someone like Rachel Porter to man their front desk has already exposed the true nature of their culture. We don't need any further explanation." The car quietly rolled into the bustling flow of city traffic, leaving behind the towering Ellington Industries building, now silently fracturing under the weight of the contempt and prejudice they had so openly displayed. But by now it was too late to fix anything. A deep crack had already formed, just waiting for the right moment to shatter everything Ellington had once proudly built. From the moment Rachel coldly uttered "deliveries, go around the back," Ellington Industries' fate was sealed. Yet neither Rachel Porter nor Gregory Adams realized that the woman they had just insulted wasn't an ordinary visitor. It was Amara Sullivan, someone powerful enough to make them pay 100-fold for their arrogance. Up on the mezzanine, soft light spilled through the tempered glass. Nina Brooks still stood, frozen, her hand clenching the railing as if trying to suppress the storm raging within her. Her heart tightened painfully with every beat as she witnessed the scene unfolding in the lobby below, a scene so suffocatingly familiar. Nina had once believed that being a manager would earn her respect and a voice, but reality had been ruthlessly different. She had seen it all: the cold, dismissive stares, the veiled insults, the countless missed opportunities, all because of the color of her skin. And now, before her very eyes, even someone as powerful as Amara Sullivan couldn't escape that vicious cycle. As Amara was shoved out the door, her gaze unintentionally met Nina's. A fleeting, haunting moment. In Amara's eyes there was no rage, no despair, only a cold composure, a silent power that stunned Nina. "Are you all right, Nina?" Emily Carter gently asked. Noticing how Nina had been standing motionless for so long, Nina turned, trying to mask the tremble in her voice. "I'm fine. Go back to your work." Emily hesitated, but under Nina's firm tone, she reluctantly walked away. Once Emily's figure disappeared from sight, Nina looked down at the lobby again. There, Rachel Porter was still chatting and laughing without a care, completely unaware of the catastrophic consequences she had just set into motion. Meanwhile, Gregory Adams, his face expressionless, leisurely stepped into the elevator. To Gregory, Everything that had just occurred was merely a calculated move in his silent power game. And in that game, Amara Sullivan was just another pawn to be used. Nina bitterly realized the truth. Ellington Industries didn't just have people like Rachel Porter spreading prejudice. It was people like Gregory Adams, powerful calculating, who truly enabled and perpetuated this toxic culture. They simply hid it better, masked it more skillfully. Nina closed her eyes, a surge of emotions crashing over her. The anger and helplessness made her head throb painfully. She had once believed she could change this place, but today, witnessing such cruelty unfold, Nina knew that belief had been nothing but an illusion. If even someone as strong as Amara Sullivan couldn't escape humiliation, what could she, a mere mid-level manager, possibly hope to do? Nina took a deep, steadying breath, brushing away the tear that slid down her cheek. In her heart, she made a silent vow. Someday she would no longer stand by and silently watch injustice unfold. Today, Nina Brooks could only stand silently and watch Amara Sullivan's figure gradually fade away. Amara's luxurious car quietly pulled away, leaving behind the grand Ellington Industries building, gleaming coldly and indifferently under the bright sunlight. But Amara knew exactly what would happen next. It would not be impulsive revenge, but a cold, calculated plan of retaliation. Oh? Inside Ellington, Nina understood as well. People like Rachel Porter and Gregory Adams would inevitably face devastating consequences for the contempt and prejudice they had sown. But today, Nina could only swallow the searing pain in her heart and wait for the day when justice would finally speak. Yet when that day came, would there be anyone left with enough courage to stand as a witness to the injustices of today? And Nina herself, would she have the strength to be part of the change? Amara's car slowly merged into the bustling crowd, leaving behind the cold building. Inside the car, Amara Sullivan sat silently in the back seat, her sharp gaze following the streams of people outside, as if carefully weighing her next moves. Beside her, her assistant Lena Howard sat quietly, knowing this was not the time to speak. It wasn't until the car crossed several busy streets that Amara finally turned slightly, her sharp eyes flashing with decisive resolve. Lena informed Legal and Communications immediately. We are withdrawing from all negotiations with Ellington Industries. I want the press release out within the next hour. Lena paused for a moment, startled by the cold determination in Amara's voice, but she quickly nodded, taking careful notes. Yes, Ms. Sullivan, but... Are you certain you want to act so quickly? Amara gave a faint, meaningful smile. A company that allows people like Rachel Porter to stand at the front desk to welcome partners will never be a trustworthy ally. What happened today isn't just a personal insult. It's a glaring sign of the toxic culture festering at Ellington. Lena stiffened, realizing that this was not just a personal reaction. It was a strategic move, an industry-wide statement, a firm declaration that would ripple across the entire tech sector. I'll get on it immediately, Lena replied, her voice small but filled with determination. While Lena quickly contacted the communications and legal departments, Amara opened her personal tablet, swiftly scrolling through the compiled reports on Ellington Industries. She knew this decision would spark an earthquake across the industry, but she could not allow herself to endure silent humiliation. Silence today would only be the preparation for a massive counterattack. In less than 30 minutes, the news that Sullivan Innovations had officially withdrawn from all agreements with Ellington Industries spread like wildfire. Major financial newspapers immediately published shocking headlines. Sullivan Innovations abruptly cancels. Strategic partnership with Ellington Industries. Suspicions of serious internal issues at Ellington. In his office, Benjamin Clark, CEO of Ellington, had just arrived when his phone began ringing nonstop. Dozens of emergency calls and frantic messages from shareholders and partners poured in. Benjamin hurriedly convened an executive meeting, his voice filled with worry and barely concealed panic. Can someone explain to me what is going on? Why did Sullivan suddenly pull out? The luxurious boardroom was now thick with tension and unease. At the far end of the table, Gregory Adams sat in silence, his cold eyes betraying no concern, only a flicker of discreet satisfaction. When Benjamin's gaze swept across the room, Gregory shrugged, feigning innocence. "Strange, I did see Mrs. Sullivan in the lobby this morning, but it seemed no one could verify her appointment." Benjamin sharply turned to his secretary. "Check immediately. Was Amara Sullivan here this morning?" The secretary stammered. "Hi, yes, sir. But it seems the receptionist refused to let her in." The entire room fell into stunned silence. Benjamin felt as if the blood in his veins had frozen. Sullivan Innovations had been the only strategic partner capable of saving Ellington from the quiet crisis looming over it. And now that relationship had been utterly destroyed. "Who's responsible for this?" Benjamin roared, struggling to contain his fury. A small voice piped up from the corner of the room. "Sir, it was the receptionist, Rachel Porter. She denied Ms. Sullivan entry and even called security to escort her out." Benjamin felt as if lightning had struck him. He could hardly believe that the unprofessionalism and prejudice of a single employee could lead to such catastrophic consequences. But deep down, he also knew the fault didn't lie with Rachel alone. This was the inevitable outcome of a culture of disdain and discrimination that had been allowed to fester at Ellington under his own watch. At the end of the table, Gregory Adams remained composed and emotionless. He had anticipated all of this, had even quietly encouraged it, because Gregory understood all too well, once Sullivan Innovations pulled out, Ellington would descend into chaos, providing him the perfect opportunity to seize control. Outside the boardroom, Nina Brooks had overheard the entire conversation. Her heart weighed heavily in her chest. She knew from the moment Amara Sullivan walked away in silence, everything had begun to unravel beyond repair. Amara's silence wasn't acceptance of defeat. It was the calm before the storm, a calculated preparation for battle. A battle where those who had arrogantly scorned others would pay dearly. Nina took a deep breath, sensing the terrifying storm that was forming. She knew Ellington Industries would never be the same again. And as for Amara Sullivan, the woman who had left so calmly and so powerfully, there was no doubt she already had a plan in motion to expose the true faces of those who had wronged her. It had only taken one small action, the cold disdain of Rachel Porter and the calculating silence of Gregory Adams for Ellington, to now face its first nightmare. And this was only the beginning. Meanwhile, in the grand lobby, Benjamin Clark stormed toward the reception desk. All the employees froze, their eyes filled with fear as they watched his heavy, determined steps. Rachel Porter was still chatting and laughing with a colleague, completely oblivious to the disaster hurtling toward her. When she looked up and met Benjamin's steel-cold stare, the smile instantly vanished from her face. Rachel, Benjamin roared, slamming both hands onto the reception desk. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Rachel jumped up in fright. "Mr. Clark, I don't understand." Benjamin cut her off, his voice cracking like a whip. "Don't understand. The woman you rudely turned away this morning was Amara Sullivan, CEO of Sullivan Innovations. She held the very future of Ellington in her hands." His words echoed through the lobby, freezing the atmosphere instantly. All eyes turned to Rachel, making her feel like thousands of sharp knives were pointing straight at her. The once arrogant look on her face had drained away, leaving her pale and trembling. "I didn't know. No one told me," Rachel stammered, her voice weak and on the verge of tears. Benjamin clenched his jaw, his eyes filled with profound disappointment and seething rage. "No one told you," Benjamin Clark roared, his eyes burning with fury. "Is that your excuse for treating a guest like that? A powerful CEO walks into our headquarters, and you don't even bother to check the appointment schedule." Rachel Porter was now completely speechless. Her arrogance and prejudice had led to catastrophic consequences, but it was already far too late. In a distant corner, Gregory Adams stood with arms folded, leaning casually against the wall, observing everything unfold with cold detachment. In his calculating eyes, a faint glimmer of satisfaction flickered. In just a few short minutes, he had achieved his first objective, humiliating Benjamin Clark and ensuring Sullivan Innovations pulled out of the deal. Gregory had long opposed behind the scenes. "I've said it from the beginning," Benjamin growled through clenched teeth. "Receptionists are the face of Ellington. And today, you've destroyed everything." Rachel trembled, her legs barely able to keep her standing. She cast a furtive glance toward Gregory, as if seeking a shred of hope for salvation, but Gregory only gave her a cold, dismissive look before turning away. In that moment, Rachel realized she was nothing more than a small pawn, used and discarded without hesitation. Benjamin took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure, then turned to the rest of the frozen employees. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice low and resolute. "Ellington is facing an unprecedented crisis. Sullivan Innovations has officially terminated all agreements with us because of this unforgivable mistake. I will no longer tolerate any irresponsibility or callousness." He turned back to Rachel, his voice sharp as steel. "Rachel Porter, you're fired. Gather your belongings and leave within 30 minutes. I don't want to see you here for another second." Rachel burst into tears on the spot, shame and humiliation streaking down her face. The colleagues who had once laughed and chatted with her now turned away silently, none daring to offer comfort. From a distant corner, Nina Brooks stood still, a complex wave of emotions surging through her. Part of her felt a grim satisfaction at seeing punishment meted out for such blatant discrimination. But Nina also understood Rachel was only the tiny visible tip of a much larger toxic cultural iceberg that had long plagued Ellington. The real danger people, like Gregory Adams, still lurked, manipulating everything from the shadows. Nina lifted her head and caught Gregory's cold, enigmatic gaze fixed on Benjamin. A shiver ran down her spine. Nina knew the internal war at Ellington had only just begun. Outside the building, Amara Sullivan had already received news of the chaos erupting within Ellington Industries. She quickly skimmed the message from Lena Howard, her face calm and unreadable. Amara knew this was only the first ripple in a chain reaction she had meticulously planned. Without hesitation, she pressed a button and sent the next command to her legal team. "Prepare all legal documentation for a discrimination and defamation lawsuit. I want this brought into the spotlight as clearly as possible." Amara leaned back into her seat, her eyes sharp as ice, staring straight ahead. Her decision was not driven by personal vendetta, but by a mission to expose and eradicate the deeply rooted toxic culture festering in the business world. Ellington Industries had only begun to feel the first tremors, and Amara knew the real storm was still ahead. Within just a few hours after the furious confrontation in the lobby, news of the incident at Ellington spread like wildfire across social media and major news outlets. Security camera footage and smartphone videos from employees quickly surfaced, capturing every humiliating moment in vivid detail. Almost instantly, Rachel Porter's cold, dismissive attitude toward Amara Sullivan became the center of a fierce public outcry. Thousands of enraged comments flooded in, calling for a boycott of Ellington Industries and demanding severe consequences for Rachel. In just a few short hours, Ellington's stock price plummeted. Panicked investors rushed to sell off shares, causing hundreds of millions of dollars in market value to evaporate, plunging the executive team into an unprecedented crisis. In the Human Resources office, Rachel Porter sat frozen in a cold chair. Across from her, Janet Collins, head of HR, pushed a thick stack of papers toward her. Rachel Janet said, her voice icy. "This is your official termination notice from the board of directors. You are dismissed immediately." Rachel trembled, her voice pleading. "Janet, please let me explain. I didn't mean to. I truly didn't know who she was." Janet shook her head, her voice laden with disappointment. "It's not that you didn't know, it's that you didn't care. Ellington will not tolerate such behavior." Then Janet added her tone even more severe. "And more seriously, you are now officially being sued by Amara Sullivan for racial discrimination and defamation." Rachel's face went deathly pale, her eyes wide with panic. "She's suing me personally," Janet nodded solemnly. "Yes. This is no longer just an internal matter. Ms. Sullivan's lawyers have already filed the official papers." Rachel's world crumbled around her. Just that morning, she had been a confident receptionist at Ellington, and now, because of a single moment of arrogance, her life and career had been completely destroyed. Elsewhere in the building, Gregory Adams continued to observe quietly, though his face remained outwardly calm. Seeing the stock prices plummet on his phone screen triggered a flicker of unease. The plan to topple Benjamin Clark that Gregory had been secretly orchestrating now seemed to be spinning out of control. His phone rang. On the other end was James Harper, CEO of Nexus Tech, Ellington's biggest rival. Gregory took a deep breath before answering his voice. Carefully measured James. "I'm here." "Gregory," James warned, "your plan may have gone too far. If Ellington collapses completely, there won't be much for us to take advantage of." Gregory gripped the phone tightly, his voice full of cold calculation. "James, this is only the initial reaction. I guarantee Benjamin will be forced to resign. And when that happens, Ellington will be ours." James let out a dry laugh. "Let's hope so. If this turns into a total disaster, I won't be involved." Ending the call. Gregory stared out the window, a creeping sense of dread gnawing at him. He had gambled everything on this power play, and now Rachel's arrogance had unwittingly thrown everything into chaos. In the CEO's office, Benjamin Clark sat motionless, his eyes vacant as his phone screen blinked endlessly with calls and messages from frantic investors, partners, and media outlets. He realized now the blame didn't rest solely on Rachel. He, too, was responsible for the toxic culture that had silently festered within Ellington all these years. Mr. Clark, a trembling assistant, stepped into the room, handing him a thick folder. "You need to see this." A young assistant, trembling, placed a tablet in front of Benjamin Clark. He glanced at the screen, and his face grew increasingly pale. The headline was clear and bold. "Amara Sullivan declares Sullivan Innovations will not partner with any company that tolerates racism." Benjamin closed his eyes and took a deep, heavy breath, his heart sinking under the weight of despair. He understood perfectly. This was no longer merely a financial incident. It had exposed the rotten foundation of Ellington Industries' culture and business ethics, things he had turned a blind eye to for far too long. In a small office on a lower floor, Nina Brooks quietly watched the flood of breaking news broadcasts, her heart heavy. Though there was a slight sense that justice was finally being served, Nina knew this was only the beginning. The truly dangerous figures like Gregory Adams were still lurking in the shadows. Nina closed her eyes, silently praying that Amara Sullivan would not stop here. Only a true earthquake could break apart the deeply rooted toxic culture festering inside Ellington, and Nina believed Amara was strong enough to do it. Whether Ellington would survive the coming storm or collapse entirely, Nina could not say. While Benjamin Clark was desperately trying to manage the fallout caused by Rachel Porter, a far greater danger was quietly building within the company, just waiting for the right moment to explode. The next morning, as Benjamin set foot in his office, his senior assistant, Isabel Turner, rushed toward him, her face tight with tension. "Clark, you need to see this immediately," Isabel said, handing him a tablet, her voice low and filled with worry. Benjamin unlocked the device, and in an instant it felt as if a heavy blow had struck his chest. On the screen were dozens of confidential emails between Gregory Adams, Ellington's executive vice president, and James Harper, CEO of direct competitor Nexus Tech. Benjamin nearly choked. "Where did these emails come from?" Isabel answered quietly, her tone grave. "Internal security detected anomalies in Mr. Adams' personal email system. He's been using private accounts to communicate with Nexus for months." With each line he read, Benjamin's face grew darker. The emails were shockingly detailed, revealing that Gregory had leaked Ellington's business strategies, top-secret technology information, and internal plans, all in exchange for a promised senior leadership position at Nexus. Without saying another word, Benjamin slammed the tablet onto his desk and strode toward Gregory's office. He burst through the door without knocking. Gregory flinched slightly, but quickly masked his reaction, feigning surprise. "Benjamin, what's going on?" Benjamin clenched his fists, his voice gravelly and tight with rage. "Gregory, are you still pretending I've read the emails? You are going to sell out Ellington to a competitor." Gregory blinked, then shrugged lightly. "Benjamin, you're misunderstanding. It was just some casual exchanges, nothing serious." "Casual exchanges," Benjamin nearly shouted. "You disclosed product information, business strategies, marketing plans, and you call that casual." Gregory rose from his chair, his demeanor disturbingly calm and indifferent, his voice laced with quiet defiance. "This is business, Benjamin. If you can't accept the harsh realities of it, then you're no longer fit to be CEO." Benjamin had to summon every ounce of strength to control his fury. He stared at Gregory with profound disappointment. "I trusted you for years, and you repay me with betrayal? If Amara Sullivan hadn't withdrawn because of Rachel's incident, she would have withdrawn because of the secrets you sold to Nexus." Gregory simply shrugged again, showing not a hint of remorse. At that moment, a cold voice came from the doorway. "Benjamin is right. The board needs to know about this." Both men turned to see Charlotte Evans, chairwoman of the board, standing there, her expression stern, her gaze sharp as a knife. Charlotte entered the room, her cold eyes fixed on Gregory. "I've reviewed the emails. This isn't just internal betrayal. It could amount to industrial espionage." She turned to Benjamin, her tone decisive. "The board will convene an emergency session, and I will be forwarding all this evidence to the authorities." Gregory's face immediately drained of color. For the first time since the chaos began, fear was visible on his face. Charlotte then looked at Benjamin. "Benjamin, this isn't solely Gregory's fault. This incident reveals a deep cultural crisis at Ellington. You will also be held accountable by the board." Benjamin nodded, his heart heavy with bitter resignation. He knew too well the rot within Ellington had festered for a long time, and he had been wrong to let it continue. From a nearby hallway, Nina Brooks quietly observed the entire scene, her heart torn between satisfaction and sadness. Gregory Adams had been exposed, but Nina knew this was only the beginning. The internal crisis at Ellington had now erupted, and the price to pay would be devastating. She closed her eyes, and the image of Amara Sullivan walking coldly, powerfully out of Ellington. That day flashed through her mind. Amara had surely anticipated all of this, and now there was no turning back. Gregory's betrayal quickly became front-page news. Every outlet and news channel covered it extensively. Major clients began terminating their contracts with Ellington one after another, citing concerns over trust and security. The stock price continued its catastrophic freefall, sending the company's market value into a nosedive like a sinking ship. Benjamin was nearly exhausted. Every call that came in was either a compensation demand or a termination notice. The once bright and energetic boardroom had now become a cold, dark place. Finally, at what would be the final board meeting, Charlotte Evans looked straight at Benjamin, her voice both cold and sorrowful. "Benjamin, we have no choice. Ellington Industries must declare bankruptcy." Benjamin bowed his head, his hands trembling. "I understand, Charlotte. I accept full responsibility, but I never imagined it would come to this." Charlotte sighed heavily, a deep sadness in her voice. "You've placed your trust in the wrong people. Now prepare the official announcement for employees and the media elsewhere in the city." Gregory Adams was also struggling with the storm. He had unleashed a storm that was now beyond his control and ravaging everything in its path. That afternoon at Gregory Adams' private estate, black FBI and SEC investigator vehicles suddenly appeared. The agents arrived with search warrants proceeding to seize all documents and personal computers for investigation. Gregory tried to maintain a calm appearance, but the tremble in his voice betrayed the panic roiling inside. "I don't understand. I thought this was just an internal company matter." An FBI agent stared straight at him, eyes icy cold. "Mr. Adams leaking confidential information for personal gain is no longer an internal issue. This constitutes serious industrial espionage and financial fraud." As the agents ransacked the house, Gregory sat motionless on the sofa, his eyes blank, staring into the void. All the power ambitions, the cold calculations he had painstakingly built, were now turning back to crush him, reducing him to a criminal suspect, facing the loss of everything, even his freedom. News of the investigation quickly spread, sending shockwaves through the financial world and the media. Nexus Tech, the company that had secretly colluded with Gregory, hastily issued a statement denying any involvement and immediately severed all ties with him. James Harper, CEO of Nexus Tech, turned his back on Gregory without hesitation, leaving him completely isolated. Just a few days later, Ellington Industries officially declared bankruptcy. The once bright and proud lobby was now filled only with a gloomy, heavy atmosphere. Employees quietly packed their belongings, their faces etched with shock and disappointment. Nina Brooks stood tucked into a corner, her eyes slowly sweeping across the familiar faces. Although she knew the collapse was the inevitable result of accumulated mistakes, the sight still tightened her heart, because those who suffered the most weren't the top executives. Like Gregory or Benjamin Clark, it was the innocent employees. Elsewhere in the city, Amara Sullivan sat in her spacious office, her eyes fixed on the continuous flood of news reports about Ellington's downfall. Laura, her trusted assistant, stood beside her, her face tinged with worry. "Ms. Sullivan, the situation has escalated far beyond what we anticipated. Ellington has declared bankruptcy, and Gregory Adams is under federal investigation. Have we gone too far?" Amara shook her head gently, her voice steady and resolute. "Not us, Laura. They brought this upon themselves. If it hadn't been me, someone else would have exposed their wrongdoings. I simply refused to let them keep hiding." Amara turned her gaze toward the window, deep, unwavering, and full of determination. She knew a new future was unfolding, one where discrimination and fraud would find no place to thrive. At Gregory's estate, an FBI agent approached him, voice cold and firm. "Mr. Adams, you are requested to come with us for further investigation." Gregory rose heavily to his feet, his eyes empty, his whole body radiating despair. In that moment, he fully grasped the brutal truth. All the power and glory he had so desperately craved had been reduced to betrayal, isolation, and ruin. At Ellington's now empty office, Benjamin Clark sat silently, his vacant eyes gazing down at the bustling streets below. The company he had dedicated his entire life to building was now nothing more than ashes. Benjamin knew full well. The collapse stemmed from the deep cultural rot, the misplaced trust in the wrong people, and above all, the disregard for business ethics. A major chapter of his life had come to a close, painful and bitter. But perhaps from this ruin, Benjamin had finally learned the most important lesson. True power lies not in money or status, but in ethics and integrity. A lesson he had realized too late. When Ellington declared bankruptcy, Rachel Porter understood that even the faintest glimmer of hope had vanished. In just a few short days, Rachel had gone from a proud receptionist to a name blacklisted across the job market. At every interview, the recruiters would initially smile, but upon reading her name, their expressions would immediately change to caution and quick rejection. After a few such encounters, Rachel realized she had been permanently blacklisted. No company dared to hire someone tainted by a racial discrimination scandal. The following days became an endless stretch of loneliness and despair. Friends and former colleagues gradually distanced themselves. Social media overflowed with harsh criticism and insults. The name Rachel Porter had become synonymous with arrogance, discrimination, and toxicity. The heaviest blow came on a gloomy morning. Rachel received a court summons and official lawsuit filed by Amara Sullivan, seeking $2 million in damages for defamation and racial discrimination. She stared at the letter in her hands, her heart seemingly frozen. $2 million was an unimaginable figure for her. Rachel collapsed onto the floor, her body trembling, tears streaming down her face. Everything she had ever had, her job, her status, her relationships, was now reduced to ashes. Because of one moment of arrogance and thoughtlessness, her life had been utterly destroyed. In the days that followed, Rachel tried reaching out to friends and family, hoping for some support. But all she received was silence or cold rejection. Even Gregory Adams, the man who had manipulated and used her, had vanished without a trace. One gloomy afternoon, Rachel sat dazed in her small apartment, staring blankly out the window. The phone rang incessantly. She knew it was reporters hunting for a scoop about the lawsuit. She ignored every call. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Rachel hesitated, then peered through the peephole. It was the landlord, his face cold and filled with undisguised disdain. "Rachel, I need to speak with you," the landlord said curtly. Rachel, worried, asked, "What is it? We can no longer continue renting to you. Too many residents have complained. They don't want someone like you living here." The words struck like a cold knife. Rachel bowed her head and replied softly, "I understand. I'll move out within a few days." The landlord said nothing more and turned away, leaving Rachel standing frozen in the now unfamiliar empty apartment. She sank onto the sofa, tears streaming uncontrollably. Amid her despair, the phone rang again. It was Amara Sullivan's attorney, Mrs. "Porter, I'm calling to inform you. If you do not pay the damages, we will proceed with further legal actions," Rachel sobbed. "Please tell Ms. Sullivan. I can't afford it. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make amends." The lawyer's voice remained cold. "I'm sorry, but Ms. Sullivan's decision is final. Her reputation and dignity were severely harmed, and you must face the consequences." The call ended. Rachel dropped the phone, buried her face in her hands, and cried, her sobs echoing through the empty, lifeless apartment. At this moment, Rachel Porter finally understood the full consequences of the arrogance and prejudice she had once displayed. From the haughty heights of success, Rachel had now plunged deep into the abyss of loneliness and failure, losing everything in a single, reckless moment. Elsewhere, Amara Sullivan quietly read through the report sent by her legal team detailing Rachel's current situation. Amara's eyes focused intently on the screen, but there was no trace of pity in their depths. For her, the goal had never been to destroy a single individual. What Amara wanted was to force society to confront the heavy consequences of contempt and discrimination. Rachel Porter's downfall was not just an expensive lesson for her alone. It was a powerful warning sent to everyone who had ever turned a blind eye to ethics and respect for others. A message that Amara Sullivan was determined to make the world recognize, no matter the cost. While Rachel was drowning in despair, Nina Brooks was quietly packing the last of her belongings in her small office at Ellington Industries. She carefully folded old documents, her heart swirling with a mix of emotions. Though she knew leaving was the right decision, deep down, Nina still mourned what Ellington had once stood for and what it could have become. The sharp ring of the phone shattered the heavy silence. Seeing an unfamiliar number displayed, Nina hesitated a moment before picking up. "Hello, this is Nina Brooks." On the other end, a warm, confident voice spoke, making Nina catch her breath. "Hello, Ms. Brooks. This is Amara Sullivan." Nina shivered slightly. She quickly steadied her voice. "Miss Sullivan, I'm truly surprised to receive your call." Amara's voice was gentle but decisive. "I've known about you since the incident at Ellington. I also know that you stood on the mezzanine that day, wanting to intervene, but finding yourself powerless." Nina gripped the phone tightly as the memories of shame flooded back. Her voice cracked. "I deeply regret not doing anything to stop what happened." "I feel ashamed of my silence," Amara replied with heartfelt empathy. "I understand that feeling, Nina, but what matters now is not the past, it's the future." She paused briefly, then continued. "I've done thorough research on your work and your outstanding contributions in cybersecurity and AI at Ellington." Nina was so stunned she fell silent for a few seconds. Throughout her career, her talent and efforts had always been overlooked. She never imagined that someone as powerful as Amara Sullivan would notice. Amara's voice came again, firm and certain. "Nina, I would like to invite you to join Sullivan Innovations. We are launching a billion-dollar AI-based cybersecurity project, and I believe you are the key person we need." Emotion surged through Nina. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity she had dreamed of, but never dared to hope for. She took a deep breath, summoning all her courage to respond. "Ms. Sullivan, I am deeply grateful for this opportunity. I would be honored to accept." Amara's smile seemed to radiate through the phone, filling the air with trust. "You deserve it, Nina. At Sullivan Innovations, we don't allow talent to be buried under prejudice." On her first day at Sullivan Innovations, Nina walked into the state-of-the-art building home to some of the leading minds in technology. Right at the entrance, Amara Sullivan was there to personally greet her, her eyes full of respect. "Nina, you will be in charge of our AI-driven cybersecurity division. This is a flagship project, and I have complete confidence in your abilities." Nina nodded slightly, her eyes burning with determination. "I will not disappoint you." "Ms. Sullivan?" Amara gently placed a hand on Nina's shoulder, her gaze sincere. "I believe in you, Nina. And remember, here you have the right to speak, the right to create change." A surge of strength welled up inside Nina. She understood this was not merely a step forward in her career. It was the beginning of a deeper journey to change a corporate culture that had long been riddled with injustice. Before long, under Nina's leadership, Sullivan Innovations' AI cybersecurity project achieved tremendous success, making waves across the tech industry. But Amara Sullivan was nurturing an even greater dream, one that reached far beyond business. One morning after a meeting, Amara personally walked into Nina's office carrying a set of documents. "Nina, I have a big surprise for you," Amara said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Nina looked up, curious. "What is it?" "Ms. Sullivan." Amara gently spread the detailed plans across the table. In the center of the page, a name stood out: Sullivan Center for Innovation. But what stunned Nina was the location marked on the map, the old building of Ellington Industries. Nina gasped. "You bought the Ellington building?" Amara nodded firmly. "Yes. I want to transform a place once steeped in prejudice and injustice into a symbol of change. A center for innovation, where talent from every background, every walk of life is welcomed." Nina stared at the plans, painful memories flooding back. But this time she felt a brilliant ray of hope rising. "This is a magnificent idea," Nina whispered, her eyes shimmering with tears. Amara smiled. "We are going to build a future where what happened at Ellington will never happen again." At that moment, Amara Sullivan gently placed her hand on Nina Brooks' shoulder, her eyes brimming with trust and sincerity. "Nina, I want you to take on the role of Chief Executive Officer for this project. No one is better suited to lead it. The Sullivan Center for Innovation will not only be a hub for advancing technology, but also a symbol of true equity." Nina stood frozen for a long moment, hardly able to believe what she had just heard. The dream she had once buried deep in her heart was now right before her eyes. Finally, she smiled and nodded firmly. "I accept, Ms. Sullivan. I promise to dedicate myself fully to making this center a beacon of innovation and social justice." News of the Sullivan Center for Innovation quickly spread, drawing immense attention from the media and the tech community. A new building was set to rise in a place once tainted by discrimination and crisis, now transformed into a symbol of progress and change. On the groundbreaking day, Nina Brooks stood beside Amara Sullivan, facing a large crowd of supporters. Her voice, full of emotion, rang out. "Today we witness rebirth from the ashes of the past. A place once tied to injustice and prejudice will now become a space of creativity where all individuals, regardless of skin color, gender, or background, will have an equal opportunity to rise and build the future." Thunderous applause erupted across the square, and eyes filled with admiration and hope turned toward Nina, fueling her strength for the journey ahead. In a distant corner, Rachel Porter quietly stopped, her empty gaze fixed on the bustling construction site. Her heart tightened as she watched the place she once worked transform into a monument to the very values she had once scorned. Rachel knew all too well this was the inevitable consequence of the prejudices she had nurtured. At the same time, in a cramped cell at a federal prison, Martin Ellis sat silently before a small screen. Images of Amara Sullivan and Nina Brooks smiling proudly at the new center slashed through Martin like a knife. He bitterly realized that the dark schemes he had once hatched had in the end paved the way for the powerful rise of those he had once looked down upon. Far away in a quiet countryside, Elliot Harris, the former CEO of Ellington Industries, spent his days in seclusion. He sat on his wooden porch, gazing at the snowy mountain peaks in the distance. Seeing the Sullivan Center for Innovation rise atop the site of his former company filled Elliot with deep regret. He understood everything happening now was simply the natural consequence of his past mistakes. At the Sullivan Center for Innovation, Nina Brooks took her first steps on a new journey. She personally designed training programs and supported minority startup projects. She listened, shared, and inspired thousands of young talents who had never before been given a fair chance. From afar, Amara Sullivan watched the center's daily growth with swelling pride and hope. For her, the Sullivan Center for Innovation was not just proof of the power of justice. It was a statement. Compassion and righteousness will always triumph over the darkest schemes. From the ashes, Nina Brooks had truly risen, becoming a symbol of innovation and justice. 1 year passed since the groundbreaking of the center. Ellington Industries had officially vanished from the business world, leaving only fragmented memories behind. In a remote town in Colorado, Elliot Harris lived a life of quiet reclusion. Each morning he sat on his porch sipping bitter coffee, his vacant eyes gazing toward the distant mountain ranges. Memories of Ellington's glorious days haunted him like relentless ghosts refusing to let go. He had tried to return to the business world, but his past had permanently destroyed his reputation. No one wanted to work with a leader who had once fostered corruption and injustice. Elsewhere in the southern United States, Martin Ellis had just completed his lengthy prison sentence in Arizona. Upon release, Martin returned to life with nothing. His wife had divorced him. Friends and former colleagues had all turned away. He rented a shabby apartment in a deserted neighborhood, struggling to get by day after day. Every time he turned on the television and saw Nina Brooks, the girl he once dismissed, now leading one of the world's most prestigious innovation centers, Martin could only bow his head and swallow his bitterness. All his past schemes, greed, and selfishness were now nothing but shattered fragments of a past that could never be repaired. One evening at sunset, Martin wandered aimlessly down a deserted street. He stopped in front of a small shop, staring at his own reflection in the cracked window. A withered, unfamiliar man. "What have I done with my life?" he whispered, his voice thick with despair. He knew the cost of trading away his morals for power was endless loneliness and remorse. In stark contrast, life at the Sullivan Center for Innovation overflowed with vibrant colors of hope and change. Nina Brooks continued to lead the center to remarkable achievements. She helped thousands of young people from minority backgrounds showcase their talents. She created a workplace that was equal, creative, and free from favoritism or discrimination. Amara Sullivan always stood beside her, supporting every initiative Nina pursued. Together, they built the Sullivan Center for Innovation into a global symbol of fairness, intellect, and progress. Their success was the clearest proof that righteousness, integrity, and compassion could overcome even the darkest conspiracies. On a quiet weekend afternoon, Amara Sullivan and Nina Brooks stood side by side on the rooftop of the Sullivan Center for Innovation, silently gazing down at the vibrant scene below. Hundreds of young people were engrossed in creating, exchanging ideas, their faces radiating confidence and hope. Amara smiled softly, her eyes filled with gratitude as she turned to Nina. "Nina, I think we've truly created something meaningful. This place isn't just a rebirth from past mistakes. It's a powerful affirmation that the future belongs to those who live and work with genuine hearts." Nina responded with a bright smile, her heart swelling with pride and happiness. "I know this journey hasn't been easy, but thanks to your decisiveness and the faith you placed in us, we're standing here today." The Sullivan Center for Innovation isn't just a tech hub, it's a lighthouse illuminating hope and equity. The two women stood in silence for a while, letting the wind play with their hair hearts brimming with trust. They knew the victory they held wasn't just a business achievement. It was a triumph of integrity, justice, and humanity, values eternal and far above all calculations. Meanwhile, in a shadowy corner of the city, Rachel Porter continued living under the heavy weight of her past mistakes. Rachel now worked long night shifts at a rundown customer service center, tucked away in a forgotten neighborhood. Each night she sat in front of an outdated computer screen, enduring cold complaints and scornful remarks from customers. "Do you even know how to do your job? This is what you call service. I don't want to waste my time talking to such an unprofessional employee." The constant barrage of disdainful words cut into Rachel like knives, each syllable stabbing deeper. She tasted the humiliation and rejection, the same feeling she had once coldly inflicted on others, without hesitation. After each shift, Rachel would drag herself out of the call center, her body drained of every ounce of strength. Colleagues' glances, half pity, half contempt, followed her as she passed, forcing her to bow her head in silence. One afternoon, while passing by the break room, she overheard a young colleague sneer, "Can you believe she used to work at Ellington? Serves her right." Rachel clenched her fists tightly, quickening her pace as if she could outrun her shameful past. Clinging to a sliver of hope, Rachel continued sending out job applications, but time and again she met nothing but scrutinizing looks and polite rejections. The real reason was clear. Her name was now forever tainted with the stigma of racial discrimination. Each evening, returning to her dark, tiny apartment, Rachel sat silently before her old computer, reading rejection emails and scrolling through the lingering harsh comments online, endless verdicts of a past she could never erase. There were nights when she collapsed in tears in the darkness, unheard, unseen, utterly alone. One evening, Rachel caught a news segment about the Sullivan Center for Innovation on a battered TV at a nearby cafe. The sight of Amara Sullivan and Nina Brooks smiling as they discussed the future of technology was like a knife twisting deeper into Rachel's chest. If only I hadn't acted like that day. She whispered, tears streaming down her face. Rachel knew there was no going back. The past had slammed shut every door of opportunity. Now all she could do was live with it, endure, and pay the price she had brought upon herself. Days drifted by in loneliness, old friends, former colleagues, they all faded away. No one wanted to associate with the disgraced name of Rachel Porter. Sometimes Rachel wondered how much longer she could endure. Then one day, at her lowest point, Rachel received a call from the legal representative of Amara Sullivan. Her heart pounded with fear, expecting another lawsuit, another unpayable fine. But the voice on the line was calm and measured. Ms. Sullivan has decided to convert the damages settlement into a community service program. This will be your final chance to make amends. Rachel was stunned, overwhelmed by both relief and profound shame. She understood this wasn't an easy forgiveness. It was the last lifeline to salvage a shred of her dignity. I accept. Please send me the details. Rachel choked out, her voice trembling. In the following days, Rachel began working at a community support center, helping those who had suffered discrimination, the very pain she had once helped perpetuate. Gradually, through every story she heard, every grateful glance she received, Rachel started to truly understand the meaning of respect and compassion. The road ahead was still long and filled with obstacles, but for the first time in a long while, Rachel felt a glimmer of peace in her soul. She knew she could never reclaim what she had lost, but at least she could live differently now, contributing in a small way to healing the wounds she had once inflicted elsewhere in the city. Amara Sullivan and Nina Brooks continued to lead the Sullivan Center for Innovation to greater heights. They knew their achievements weren't simply about business success. They had planted seeds for a fairer, more humane future, a future where every talent could shine, no matter their background or skin color. Rachel Porter persisted in sending job applications to various companies, clinging to the fragile hope that one day she might escape her monotonous, exhausting work. But time and again, every interview ended the same way, with scrutinizing eyes, deep suspicion, and ultimately a cold shake of the head. I'm sorry, but we cannot hire someone with your background. Rachel knew too well the reason behind those rejections. The racial discrimination scandal from years ago had completely destroyed her reputation and credibility. The name Rachel Porter had become an indelible stain on every job application. Each night, returning to her small apartment, she sat silently in front of her computer screen, reading rejection emails and cruel online comments, constant reminders of the mistakes she had made. Many nights, Rachel collapsed in tears in the darkness, surrounded by four silent, cold walls. Only in those moments did she fully comprehend the devastating consequences of her arrogance and prejudice. The price she was paying was far higher than she had ever imagined. One evening, by chance, Rachel caught a news report on the old TV at a corner cafe. The screen showed Amara Sullivan and Nina Brooks beaming as they spoke with vibrant young people at the Sullivan Center for Innovation, like a dagger twisting deep into Rachel's heart. If only I had acted differently, Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. If only I hadn't looked down on Amara that day, maybe my life wouldn't have ended in such ruin. She knew the past could not be changed, and her honor could never be restored. All she could do now was accept and endure. Day after day, Rachel sank deeper into isolation. Old friends and former colleagues from Ellington avoided her as if she were a permanent stain. Sometimes Rachel wondered how much longer she could hold on. One day, when despair had reached its deepest point, Rachel unexpectedly received a call from the law office representing Amara Sullivan, her heart clenched with fear, bracing for another lawsuit. But the voice on the other end was calm and formal. Ms. Sullivan has decided to convert the $2 million damages settlement into mandatory community service. This is your final opportunity for redemption. Rachel broke down in tears. She realized this was not just mercy. It was the last lifeline Amara had extended to her. Please convey my deepest thanks to her. I accept, Rachel replied, her voice trembling. In the days that followed, Rachel began working at a community support center, listening to and assisting victims of discrimination. Day by day, story by story, she slowly began to understand the pain she had once carelessly contributed. The road ahead remained rough, but for the first time in years, Rachel felt a small light within her, a sense that she was finally doing something right. Elsewhere, the Sullivan Center for Innovation thrived, under the brilliant leadership of Nina Brooks and the unwavering support of Amara Sullivan. Here, thousands of young people from minority communities were trained, inspired, and given opportunities to enter the tech industry no longer limited by race, gender, or background. Amara Sullivan, through the success of Sullivan Tech and the Sullivan Center for Innovation, had become a symbol of positive social change. Her influence reached beyond business as she actively advocated for racial equity policies at a national level. During a congressional hearing, Amara spoke passionately, "We cannot change the past, but we can build a future where every young person, regardless of color or circumstance, has the opportunity to pursue and achieve their dreams." Her words stirred hearts across the nation, helping to push forward legislation, promoting equal opportunity in tech education and investments in minority communities. One evening, standing on the rooftop of the Sullivan Center for Innovation, Amara quietly gazed over the sprawling city bathed in the golden hues of sunset. Far away, the old building that once belonged to Ellington Industries, once a symbol of injustice and corruption, had now been reborn into a beacon of hope and renewal. Nina approached and smiled warmly. "Amara, you've achieved the impossible, not only rebuilding a center, but resurrecting dreams that had long been buried." Amara nodded, her gaze deep and reflective. "Nina, I've realized that true strength isn't in revenge or defeating others. Real strength is turning pain into the power to build something better and lasting." Nina stood silent for a moment, then responded sincerely. "I believe what we're doing today will ripple through generations. The young people we're helping now will become the leaders who continue to change the world." Amara smiled, her eyes shining with hope as she gazed toward the distant horizon. She knew that her greatest victory wasn't fame or fortune. It was the positive change she had helped create and the opportunities opened for thousands, perhaps millions. In another part of the city, Rachel Porter continued her work at the community center. She was no longer the arrogant, cold woman she once had been. Now, day by day, she quietly stitched back the wounds she had once helped inflict. Life was still full of hardship, but with every small act of kindness, every sincere encouragement she gave, Rachel felt she was slowly rediscovering the meaning of her life. Meanwhile, Mark Whitmore, the former vice president of Ellington, lived a lonely existence in Arizona. Richard Stanton, the former CEO of Ellington, also lived in seclusion in a small town in Colorado. The glories of their pasts long faded into nothingness. They had become relics of a bygone era, bitter lessons etched into history. Back on the rooftop of the Sullivan Center, Amara Sullivan stood silently gazing at the city lights sparkling beneath the night sky. "Everything can change," she whispered to herself, and in that moment she knew the lives they had touched. The future they had helped to build would be the most beautiful legacy she could ever leave behind. We are not bound by the past, by prejudice, or by injustice. We always have the power to choose a different path to build a better world. From high above at the Sullivan Center for Innovation, Amara Sullivan quietly gazed at the ever-moving city below. But today, the city carried a new meaning for her, a message of rebirth, of rising beyond mistakes toward a future rooted in fairness and humanity. Amara understood that even though she had originally walked into Ellington simply to evaluate the company's culture, that fateful moment had entrusted her with a far greater mission, to transform pain into strength and to use that strength to change the world. The story of Amara Nina Brooks and even those who had once fallen, Rachel Porter, Mark Whitmore, and Richard Stanton, all converged into one profound lesson. Prejudice and injustice can destroy everything, but compassion, integrity, and the desire for change will always breathe new life and hope into the future. Amara smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. She knew that even though this chapter had closed, the legacy she had built would continue to ripple outward stronger than ever. The journey of Amara Sullivan was not just a costly lesson about the consequences of prejudice and discrimination. It was also a powerful testament to the strength of kindness and the ability to heal and rise from the wounds of the past. From what began as a seemingly simple encounter at Ellington, Amara had built a profound legacy, not just for herself, but for her entire community and society at large. And what about you? If you were Amara Sullivan in this story, would you choose revenge? Or would you use your strength to create something better for the world? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and meaningful stories. Thank you for being with us. See you in the next video.